Hello, happy Friday, everyone. I feel like after last week, I need to start the episode with a song and have you name who sings it. It was kind of like name that tune. Do you guys remember that show from back in the day? And they would play like one note and people would guess it. I don't know how anybody could do that with one note or two notes. It was crazy, but I got sucked into that TV show back in the day when it would be on. I don't know if it was reruns or whatnot. I just remember it from when I was little. So welcome, everyone. Lots of good questions to touch base on. Always, hey, everybody. Hey, Samantha. Hey, Kate, baby. As always, drop your questions in the chat, and I will answer them as we go as well. I've had some really good interviews this week. I had an interview with 2 different viewers, and they both asked me 3 questions. So those videos will be coming up next week that you guys can see what they asked me. And always blown away by the questions. They're always completely new and unique. So I will watch for a post in the chat portion on my channel, kind of like on the main page, and I will post for a chance to sign up to ask me 3 questions. And so we do a live chat or a video chat together. So I get to see and meet a viewer one-on-one, and then you ask me some questions. Hey, Singer Savannah, how are you? I'm doing good. Nice to see you here. Talk about the Amish faith. So I went to Amish baby's funeral. I attended a baby's funeral in Amish religion. There's many versions of Amish. Saying an Amish faith is kind of like saying a Christian faith. There's all different versions that people follow. So it depends on, and kind of like Jewish is from a place. It's not specifically always the religion. So saying someone's Amish doesn't mean that they follow a specific religion, and there's different versions. So that's kind of tricky, Anna, or Anna. I'm not sure how you pronounce your name. But I plan to go to visit the I was just reading. I plan to go visit a friend who's a funeral director, and he does a lot of Amish in his community. I don't have a lot of Amish where I live. We just have a friend who happens to be Amish, who lives about an hour and a half away, and he lost a baby, and so we went to that funeral and got to experience a little bit of it from kind of the attendee side. But I know through speaking to some other directors, some of what their area Amish folks do. So it's a great topic to cover, but there are so many different varieties. But yes, we can definitely do that. So from here, what do you think your life will change? My life specifically? You mean after the virus and after everything? The virus is never going to go away. It's a virus. It's always going to kind of exist, like a lot of other, illnesses, even like polio. We've kind of eradicated it in a lot of areas, but it still exists. It's still there in somewhere. So I think it's always going to kind of be there. I think there's going to be people who learned things during this and people who didn't. People who try and return to a way, but because they don't understand, we all have to find just new ways. I have found deeper meaning in relationship. I've developed new, stronger relationships. I've realized friends who maybe don't put in effort. I feel like I've learned a lot about the people surrounding me and the people who really enrich my life and my kids and my family and everything. And so I have a new, deeper meaning to all of that. And I feel like that's my biggest thing I'm going to take away from all this. And also just to see how the response of the world, to see how inaccurate media can really be when it hits closer to home, how caught up in drama people get when it comes to politics or things like that. I think all of it has been amplified more, and it's been quite enlightening. So, hey, Michael, welcome. What happens to prisoners whose family does not claim the body? Does the prison have embalmers on staff? No, the prison, if you die in a prison, you do get autopsied for every time I've ever heard of anybody dying in a prison. That's what For all the, funeral directors and stuff, they've said that if you die in the prison, you go for an autopsy and then are released. It'd be the same as an unclaimed body of anybody. You go through the process and they either bury or cremate, depending what they do with the indigent. So my girls are doing good, kind of the same part of course. I think they're feeling emotions they've never felt. They're doing things they've never done. Yeah, in side note, I know I need to be talking about funeral stuff here, but the last 2 days we've been talking about the gentleman down, is it Georgia, that was murdered while he was out jogging. And so today we're going to go for a walk, 2.23 miles in honor of him. Is it Run for Maud? And so my children and I have been having some big conversations. I think that learning is just as important as any other homeschool learning about blessing people by dropping presents at their door to bless their day, learning about, watching a movie about the ocean and learning about things in the ocean, and learning about life, learning about hate, learning about racism, learning about the history of things that have happened in our societies and in our world. It is frightening what these kids already know and understand through just perception, not us even teaching them. So things that have come out of my 6-year-old mouth have blown me away, have also made me feel really good as a parent, and thankful for educators and the things that are kind of instilled in them, because hate can be taught and it's part of your upbringing, especially a lot of the racism, it's part of your upbringing. So I'm very thankful. But a lot of discussion has happened at our house the last 24 hours about a lot of very deep things. And I know a lot of parents will avoid conversation about these things because they don't want to expose their kids. But my kids and I talk about a lot because I deal with a lot at work. And, a lot of words come out in conversation between me and my husband, and they want to know what they mean and they want to understand. So a lot has been laid out on the table with them, which is kind of crazy. Thank you, Kate baby. So questions to go to. If you can do, how do you deal with emotions at a funeral? Do you carry Kleenex on you? Do you openly sob? I have never sobbed at a funeral, ever. I have shed a couple tears, maybe. But typically, if I get emotional at a funeral, it's that like after I've left or when I get back to the funeral home, kind of when everything is done. I am really very much in work mode. I am not getting caught up in what is happening, because if I am emotional, who's in charge? If I'm emotional, then who's making sure everything's handled? So I'm making sure logistics are handled for the family who has entrusted them to me. And so it's not that I'm emotionless, it's that it may come at a different point. So there have been times I get in the car after the graveside and I close the door and I drive away and I literally cry the whole way back to the funeral home. Or I get home that night after work and I sit in the car and cry before I go in the house or something. My moments are usually at different points where things have built up, and then I let them out after my responsibilities are done. I remember so clearly after I buried the basketball player where we had like 1,600 people and the media was insane there. And I had to be on point the whole time. I could not get caught up in the emotion of any of it because I needed to be focused. As soon as I left that cemetery, it was like the weight of the world was off my shoulders. I went and got a pizza, a beer. I put on my pajamas and I cashed out on the couch that night and prayed that the phone didn't ring for a new call, because I needed to just decompress and relax and just let myself breathe for the first time in like a week. So it just depends how I take those emotions. There seem to be so many abandoned funeral homes. Is it common for funeral homes to go out of business and the owners just take up and leave while everything? Yeah, what do they do? I don't feel like there's a ton. I don't know of really any anywhere in my area. Usually the building is repurposed and sold and becomes something else, a residence or whatever it becomes. I don't know of any that are just literally abandoned. I know they're out there, but I don't feel like there's really that many. But selling all the furniture, selling everything in it, you would have to go through and sell bit by bit by bit. I don't know. I don't see it really happening that much to be a huge problem, but maybe in certain places or areas it is that I've never heard of. I cry at everything, Pat. Yeah, and the thing is, I am a crier, and I can cry on cue. I can, I've always been an emotionally driven person. I am so emotionally driven. So it's crazy that I ironically do this for work, because you would think I would be emotional all the time, but I think because I'm so task focused on caring for that family and getting the deceased where they need to get to, that I don't get in the feeling part of it during that time. It's crazy. Ended 75 years ago. And what was the nearest funeral for a World War II veteran you ever did? I've buried many, many, many World War II veterans. At one point, there was like 1,400 dying a day. At the beginning of my career, it has dwindled obviously completely down because they're well into their 90s, most of them that are still living. I just did an interview yesterday with a funeral director who buried a killed in action World War II individual. He was a Marine, and they just recently found him this year and buried him and brought him back home. So watch for that video coming. It's beyond moving. Like, if you don't cry, I'm going to question you. No, it's like the story is, you can't even hardly believe that it's real, but it's amazing. It's an amazing story. So coming soon, guys. All right, more questions here. Where is my question list? All right, so Linda wrote me, and she kind of asked a lot of the same questions that I think so many of you have. How long does it take for an embalmed individual to totally decompose? I'm not going to answer that. Go watch my video of the most common asked question. And what happens to all the fluid in the casket? Do you just lay in muck forever? It depends if it eventually dries up, or it just may be sludge kind of in that casket for a very long time. It just depends over time what kind of transpires. I wondered if my mother would have had those eye caps or the cotton piece inserted. Do you close the mouth the same way, or maybe just glue it, since the viewing time is very short for a non-embalmed person? Yes, I would use eye caps on everybody. Some embalmers don't use them at all, and they just use a little bit of Vaseline under the lid. But I would wager to guess that probably your mother, who was not embalmed and had a quick viewing before the church service, probably had eye caps. The mouthpiece is only used if there's dentition that needs to be replaced, and we don't have dentures that fit correctly, and they're missing a lot of teeth, or they have like a huge overbite or underbite, and we need to kind of balance it out. Have you ever visited the body farm? It's on my top 3 lists of wishes to go, so I have not. It's very hard to get into them. I do not want a viewing in a funeral home. I can't decide if I want cremation or not. Are there other things to consider as far as one, cremation versus burial over the other? It is really personal preference. There's nothing really I can say about either. Cremation's not reversible, burial is. So, you can always go back and cremate a person if you choose that later down the road, but cremation is kind of end of the road there. It's final. Can't put that person back together. So, if you're questioning or you don't quite know, it just depends. With cremation, you have to still decide what happens following the cremation, whereas burial, then you're done. So you need to follow through with each step to look at what those next steps would be. because that will really define what you do in the full expanse of it. How many babies have I done? You mean buried? Or which interesting question. I swear you guys have like been following me or something, because I just shot a video today at a cemetery talking about the baby program I used to do, burying stillborn babies. So, and I buried well over 100 babies just in that program, probably alone. So I've handled a lot of babies over the course of my times. I'm very comfortable handling babies. I think because a lot of male directors often, if there's a female on staff, turn those over to the female director for some reason. And I say it's in my genes because my mom worked in aftercare. My mom was at newborn, as a doctor, pediatric nurse. She worked in labor and delivery. She worked for the Fetal Death Board. She worked for SIDS Foundation. Like I am her child 120%. And I feel like genetically I got all that from her, working with baby families. So I am never nervous going into work with a baby family. It's a comfort zone for me. Of course it's sad. Of course it's hard, but I feel comfortable working with those families. And there's a lot of people who do not feel comfortable at all. It is a very, very uncomfortable zone for them to walk into. And that means the family may not be served as well as they could be with somebody who's more comfortable. So we all have our strong points. There's certain family types that maybe, if I thought about it, I didn't like to deal with. I would have to think about it and think what that was. But, I think we all have our strong points. So why do I have to go to a different section of the cemetery for a green funeral? Because not having a vault creates a certain ground structure, because that ground is going to sink and cave in eventually, whereas with a vault, it's not going to. And so they maintain certain areas of the section or the cemetery to look a certain way. And then the other cemetery sections then would need to maintain more. How come it's so common for a funeral director business to run in families? I think out of tradition and history, that's kind of how it always was. Like it was a family business that carried on. And there's a lot of other businesses that connected to funeral business. So over history, funeral director businesses also were connected to cabinet making because they made the caskets within the woodworking business, or a florist was connected in with a flower shop. The ambulance service was run with the funeral home. So the hearse was the ambulance in town. So there's a lot of different businesses that coincided together over the history. So you could work within the business, but also do these other facets as well within other businesses. COVID-19 it doesn't die. It's either active or inactive. It becomes inactive when a person dies and all the protein they've used up, that living protein, but it's still active for a long time. So there are studies, not so much studies, but it has been found by some people that 28 days past death, it has been found active on some deceased. So we're getting a lot more tests, that a lot more embalmers and we're doing a lot of different tests on post-embalming if we can find the virus still active. Post certain sanitation, are we finding it active? So we're trying to find out within the funeral business what we can do with the deceased to make it safer for us and for the living that encounter the deceased. So if we can find something we can do immediately to the individual to sanitize or something, that will be really helpful. So we're finally able to get testing and things. So that has all started. A lot of talk right now going on within the industry about it. So trying to figure out answers, but yes, it doesn't die. It comes to the funeral home with them. We are very, very much frontline. We are very, very much exposed what we are doing. So Casey is asking that her father died, and the woman he left behind, was it his spouse? Were they married, Casey? Never got him a monument. I wanted to know if it was legal for me to get one. You know, the worst case scenario is she would have it removed if she owns the burial space, if they were married. It all depends on if they were legally married. As much as I'd love to stay, Kari. Yeah, I'll talk to you soon. Clinton Township, Michigan. Hey, Billy. Good to see you here. All right, so I've answered Linda's questions. Hope you and your family are well. As you may already know from my questions about a year ago, accuracies of some videos. What comes to my head is Final Destination, when one of the characters die and the other characters come to visit him in the prep room. Yes, that's in the first movie, and then they throw him in the fire of the retort. They're not going to just throw him in like that. There's, like, in your prep room, you don't have this big fire just there. That's more for the drama of it. You know, everything is always written more dramatically than it really does ever happen in real life. So movies are always amped up and we're made to be the scary person, which I don't think I'm scary at all, but I don't know, maybe I can be. Like, I know some movies like Afterlife and Departures, so I would love any input. I will reference you over to my video, Robert, who is asking about videos and stuff, to my video on TVs, shows, and movies about funeral homes. I've talked about that quite a bit over in that video. I love that I keep finding and things popping up about funeral homes. Like, I was watching an old episode of NCIS the other day, and they were in the funeral home, and, you know, they were going to embalm him alive and such. And of course, she was the crazy, you know, murder lady. That was the funeral director, like, you know, because we make the best crazy murder people. I don't know. You know, who knows? Somebody told me my laugh was like diabolical the other day. Like, I sound like I'm maybe the crazy murder lady. I don't know. Oh, there were some things incorrect. Let's see. Yes, stepmother. So, you know, if you're not in talk with her, Casey, I ask if she minds if you purchase one. It may be a cost thing that she doesn't want to spend the money, but ask if you can purchase one for him and just get an individual stone for him. Who knows if there's two spaces or not. You know, the worst case is they're going to have it removed, but you'll need to call first, try and talk to her. Second, call the cemetery and ask what their rules and regulations are. If you don't own the grave space, then most likely you can't put something there, but I would make those two phone calls first before you tried something. Do you find it eerie to work on individuals that committed crimes? Yes, it's weird. You know, I so clearly remember embalming this gentleman. He had come out of a prison. He had died in a hospital, so he wasn't autopsied. And he was a pedophile, and it had been his daughter. And knowing kind of how disgusting he was, it made me want to aspirate him a little longer. But, you know, like, it's not like I can punish him after death. What am I going to do? I'm not the jury. I'm not the executioner. He's already being judged, and I get that. You know, it's not up to me. It's not up to my choices. I try and go back to the thought that I heard, I think it was Bernie Fountain said at one of his things, it's the glimmer theory. Like, everybody was a glimmer in somebody's eye. Everybody was a little 2-year-old running around their yard, looked upon by somebody that loved them. Somebody, it might not have even been their parents, but somebody that loved them at one point. But they weren't always the horrible people maybe they died as. So I try and look at that. You know, you look at the shooters in Columbine or Sandy Hook and stuff, like they were loved by somebody. They had parents. Those parents had the right to grieve and mourn their child and to bury their child. They didn't commit the crime. They deserve to get to mourn a loss as well because they didn't do this. So to me, it's for the surviving. It's not for the deceased that we're caring for them and burying for, them with all this respect and all this dignity. You're doing that for the survivors. Because most people will say, yeah, that person didn't deserve anything and they don't deserve a burial. They don't deserve any respect. They don't deserve that time. But for the living, they do deserve that because they're the ones that have to go on knowing what their family member did. They're the ones that have to go on having lost somebody that up until the point they were told that their child or their husband or wife was a murderer, they loved them and didn't know that really about them. Maybe knew they were sick, ill, but they didn't know they could be capable of such a thing. So it's a huge, I don't know if it's a maturity thing, getting to the point of having a sense about it that I can respect the family enough to care for that individual. If that answers it. I love because when I kind of get talking about something deep, the comments stop getting posted. So people must be listening to me. I don't know. It's kind of fun. Thank you, Man Mountain, for sharing that. That's awesome. If someone is curious about a career in embalming with funeral homes, Billy, that's a great question. Would funeral homes allow for somebody to come in to view the process? You really have to just ask and see. You may hit upon a funeral director who allows you to come in and watch the process, but usually you need to be enrolled in school. And even at that point, they might not because some state laws are really strict about that. And people don't want to lose their license. If I had just whoever in embalming with me, I could lose my license because it's a private sacred moment. And so there's a lot of legality there. Why is the heart so hard to burn during cremation? It's not. It's the same as everything else. It's not hard to burn. Are there different color of embalming or for the different types of cavities of the body? The different fluids sometimes are different colors. Some of them have a pink hue to them. Some have a yellow hue, some are clear. It's not so much the main injection will oftentimes have a pink hue to it just because it's kind of replicating the pink hue to the skin. Thank you, Man Mountain. That's awesome. Have there been any body awaken when you were declared dead? No, I've never had that. I don't know any funeral director who has had that happen. Can a person legally ban a family member from coming to their funeral, like in my case, my mother? No. You would have to just have a private event that they didn't know about. If it's a private event, then yes, you can ban people. But if you have a public visitation or a public service, then you've invited the public. So it's a public event and we cannot ban people from being there. We can ask them to leave if they show up. And then if there's any sort of fight or anything, then we can call the police to have somebody removed, but we cannot ban them from the event. What's the most valuable class you took in school? It was before mortuary school. It was one of my prerequisites, and I would have to say it was my public speaking class. And it's not because I feel like I got over a fear, but I feel like I found my own voice. I found how to speak in front of a group when people were not paying attention. Speaking in front of students, they're half asleep or they're doodling about something else. And so it's not always the most attentive crowd. And I feel like I found my voice and ability to speak and not worry about what response was coming at me, because it wasn't really about me. It was about my content. It was just about whatever was going on with them. So I think I understood more about getting up and speaking in front of people and what responses there might be and not taking it as personally. So I, honest to goodness, think that public speaking class was probably my best class that I learned the most from. Have I ever been on a removal and the gurney collapsed on you? Never when somebody was on it. I don't think. We've had trouble with it collapsing. We had to get, like, I had to crawl up in the car one time and we were like beating on the wheel trying to get the darn thing to go down. It was like locked. It would not go. So I don't know. I've never had a body. I'm trying to think now. I feel like I did maybe once at a nursing home. It wasn't my end. It was somebody else's end and it like went down, but it wasn't, we didn't drop anybody. It wasn't like a huge deal. So do funeral homes turn in death certificate information to Social Security? Yes, we have contact paperwork that we send to Social Security. And now when it's an online death certificate process, it sends a notification to Social Security to contact them that somebody died. So it is part of the process that something is sent to them for it. So here, how does a monument company deliver a grave marker to the correct grave, especially in a large, busy cemetery? What steps do they take to get it to the correct burial plot? So a cemetery is laid out with numbers and letters and sections, and it's just like an address at a house. So the monument company will confirm with the cemetery that Bob Smith is in grave 2, lot 4, section B in the cemetery, and they will go to that section. Usually the cemetery pours the foundation, which is the cement pad that the headstone sits on. So often you're just going into this section and you're looking for the foundation that's already poured in that area, in that spot, and they set the stone. They may use a boom truck, or depending how big, if it's a small pillow marker, might just take 2 people to lift it on. But there is an address essentially for that grave space that they go to. So it's pretty easy for them, I think, to get to there. Had Jean asked me about changing careers. I'm 49 and thinking about going to funeral directing school. I have to do this online. Do you know anything about these specific programs? Gupton Jones, I did a video on Gupton Jones in Georgia. I did a tour, so make sure you go check out the video on their program and on their tour on my site. It's under the Campus Tours series. I don't know about the one in Alabama, Jefferson State, so I'm sure you can Google and find some information. Am I too old? There's never a too old. This is a very common second career for people. I get asked that question a lot as well, like, am I too old? Can I do this? This is very common as a second career. If you don't feel like investing the years of schooling, it's usually a 4-year process. You have your prerequisites that may take about 2 years, 1 year of mortuary school, and 1 year of an apprenticeship. Then you take your state and national boards. If you have another career, some of your classes may transfer over, so it may be shortened to 3. But until you look at transcripts and see how long it's been, you don't know. So you need to confer with a school and they can run and look at all your stuff, kind of just run the report of what you would still need and see how long it is. Shadowing at the funeral home is really your best first step. You can see what all the different areas of the funeral home are, because maybe you don't want to go get your license to be an embalmer and a funeral director. Maybe you just want to work pre-need, or you want to work doing arrangements, or just work as a funeral helper. You can do a full-time job as a funeral assistant where you help the funeral director with heck anything, dressing and casketing and moving things around and working the funerals and helping with the families. So there's a lot of things you can do as a non-licensed person. So it's, there's so many possibilities, always an option to do. All right, one more. I went to a funeral and the person was lying in the bottom of the casket. There was a glass enclosure covering the entire open portion of the full couch casket. Would this have been something that the military did, shipping bodies home due to the length of time it would have taken because of smells? I don't know. I'll have to check into if it was maybe a traditional for military back in Vietnam or not to have like a plexiglass type cover so that you couldn't get to the deceased. I actually don't know that answer, but I will find it out for next week. I will ask around to some people who worked during that time and find out what the tradition was. Thank you for asking that. I love these new questions. It makes me so happy. I went and walked around a couple cemeteries today. Actually, I was driving through a town that I used to work in a lot and did a couple quick videos passing by some headstones that really brought me back to especially the first couple of years of being a licensed director. So I shared a couple of those stories with you. Let me do one or two more. My question is crazy. What would you do if the retort machine went down halfway through the process of cremation? No crazy questions. Easy answer. You would just remove the individual where they were at in the process and place them in a new retort. It might mean placing them in a new box to move them easier, but you would take out the ash kind of portion, that cremated remain portion that was maybe there, or just take the whole, everything you could out and move them into a new retort to continue the process. My mother-in-law was cremated, had no life insurance. Can my husband's brother be put in with her if they will fit? If you're talking about an urn, Lisa, I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but if you're talking about an urn, if they'll fit together. So urns are not made for two sets of cremated remains, but sometimes the two individuals are small enough you can fit them both in a little bit larger, or you can just transfer them both into a dual capacity, like a double capacity urn, a companion urn they're called, and then they will both fit for sure. Have you witnessed family members get upset because after embalming and makeup, their loved one looked nothing like they did in life? How would you handle that? It definitely happens. And people, they're never going to look like how they did. We're working against gravity. We're working against death. We're working against all sorts of things. Usually the response is good. Sometimes, oh, they have too much makeup on. That's easily changed. The problem is if you have a problem and you don't voice it and say, is there anything we can do about this during the family time before we open the time up to public, then we can't really fix something we don't know is a problem. And that's a huge common thing, is that people are just, they don't like how a person looks, but they don't tell anybody. We can't fix what we don't know is wrong. And we can tell you if we can do anything about it or why it looks that way. So that's why communication is so essential. Rather than being pissed at the funeral director, never voicing anything to them, and then just talking crap about them later, like the funeral director never had a chance to make it right with you. You never gave them an opportunity. And that happens often. So give them a chance, be vocal. It's your right to be vocal. It's your time to be vocal. You don't get that moment again. So have a conversation. And honey gets more bees, talk nice, communicate with them like they're on your team, because they are there to be on your team during this, and see what resolve you can get to. Kayla, I'm going to do one last question. I'd love to work in the industry, but I'm disabled. I don't know what I could do. Well, until you get there and look into it, you don't know what you're going to be able to do. I know people in wheelchairs that do the work. I know people who are dyslexic that do the work. I know people who have a lot of different disabilities, what you would say disabilities, that work in the funeral home. So don't use that as an excuse not to try it, because until you try it, you don't know. And it really does depend on your hindrances and what you have going on. But I know people that are blind and deaf that work at funeral homes. I'm going to try and interview him at some point. We got to find out a way to be able to do it. That he works at a funeral home. So, there's so many ways to do things and things you could do. All right, guys. One more good question. Susan, somebody at the mortuary school is going to have to look at your things. If your schooling was like 20 years ago, then a lot of it may not transfer because it's been so long ago. So you really have to have them look at your at your stuff. We're doing pretty good, Tina, with cleaning and sanitizing supplies. Like, it's all balanced out. Everything has slowed in most all areas. So we kind of had this spike in deaths, and everything is slowing right down. So, you know, quarantine is working, and we're getting the exposure and everything slowed down. So we're doing good. Big hugs, Buford, which I love the name Buford. Seriously, that's amazing. I will take your hug from Tennessee, because I don't think you could be named Buford if you're not from Tennessee. So I love that. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you all. I like doing this bonus coffee chat once, you know, on Fridays, a kind of bonus day. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers this weekend. I know some of you are experiencing a first Mother's Day or second or third without your mom. Kate, baby, you, I believe, are one of them, correct? And no, Kate, you're not. I'm thinking of somebody else. Yeah, you are. And there's a lot of you, I think, who are going through that, and it's a hard, or maybe you've lost a child and you're going through a Mother's Day without a child now. There's a lot of that. So happy Mother's Day to you. It's still a Mother's Day. You're still a mother if you've ever carried a child. You're still a mother. You know, you still have a mother, even if your mother has died. So thinking about all of you, and you guys have a good weekend. I will see you back next week on Wednesday for coffee chat, and I need to get to editing all these little videos I've been doing for you guys. So take care, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.